When a police officer shot and killed a teenager named Nahel M in Paris, outrage boiled over the spread across France. A tragedy that has sparked destructive nights and revived a heated debate about discrimination and policing in low-income, multi-ethnic communities. His killing is now a rallying call in a similar way that George Floyd's murder was by the police in Minneapolis in 2020, and that had in fact also sparked widespread unrest over the police use of force, particularly against the minorities. Now, Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin has said that the average age of the 3,000 people arrested over the past week was just 17. Mayor Vincent Jeanbrun has led the march along with other right-wing mayors and officials who later gave a speech denouncing an attack on democracy. French prosecutors have in fact now opened an investigation into the death of a 27-year-old man who was hit by a projectile at the time of riots on Saturday in Paris.
The mood was somber but defiant at a gathering in the French town of Laï-la-Rose, one of many outside town halls across the country. This rally was in solidarity with the town's mayor, whose home was attacked over the weekend by rioters enraged by the police shooting of a teenager of North African descent.
Nous avons vu le vrai visage des émeutiers.
The mayor himself, Vincent Jeanbrun, said rioters rammed a vehicle into his home Saturday evening while his wife and children were asleep inside and set it alight. This woman who works in Laï-la-Rose said she found the violence inexplicable in what she thought was an extremely calm town with very civic people. This man said the death of Nahel, the teen shot by police, was inexcusable, but he didn't see the connection with attacking the mayor and said there was a general feeling of disproportion with what happened. Tension appears to have ebbed across the nation with fewer arrests on Monday compared to previous days of riots that were triggered by the fatal police shooting of Nahel M last week. The incident tapped into a deep vein of resentment towards police and what some Muslim communities of North African descent say is a long history of racial profiling, and sparked days of riots that left behind torched cars and looted stores and properties owned by the state. However, rather than focus on race, far-left and far-right lawmakers on Monday blamed failures in government policies for the riots. Prime Minister Elizabeth Bourne acknowledged some soul-searching should happen for the administration, but that will only come after order is restored.
The crisis brings up numerous questions, and the different parliamentary group presidents had the opportunity to speak about these topics. But I think we'll have the opportunity to meet again, to pursue and to go deeper in these conversations. In any case, today our priority is to ensure the return of Republican order with the kind of order maintained tonight and with a strong criminal response.
French President Emmanuel Macron has postponed a state visit to Germany to deal with the crisis. He's set to speak to more than 220 mayors on Tuesday of towns and cities that were affected by the riots.
Let me now bring in my guest on this live stream, Mr. Berzin Wagmar from the SOAS University in London. Mr. Wagmar, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this important conversation. What do you think has led to these kind of protests, and why are they still continuing? What has really got the society in France so angsty?
First things first, that needs to be pointed out is that social media has played a disproportionately debilitating role in all this, particularly TikTok and Snapchat. And several authorities across France for the last 2 days have been asking the government to clamp down on the internet traffic for this, because there is every evidence to show now that TikTok, a Chinese app, is actually helping these rioters and nihilists to go and attack shops and establishments, telling them, directing them where to go and do the mayhem as such. That needs to be pointed out, and it tells you something about what TikTok really can do and its pernicious effects everywhere. Putting aside the social media aspect, that's just a symptom. The entire French Fifth Republic is undergoing an existential crisis for a variety of reasons. But President Macron has been dithering and has been Janus-faced in his attitude.
Okay.
On the second night of rioting, he was at an Elton John concert. Although he's postponed his state trip to Germany. Then at the same time, once the problem occurred after the shooting, he came down heavily on law enforcement, chiding them for their brutality, which led to a backlash from the centrist and right parties that you are undermining the political process and legal custodians of the state, and quite rightly so. And then he went and blamed the suburban immigrants and the lumpen elements who have gone out and created this rioting, arson, and violence. So he doesn't seem to show a coherent response in any of this. Partly this has to also do with the French state, historically speaking. By that, I mean that the French executive has immense powers vested in it as a republican monarchy. But at the same time, it is unresponsive to public sentiments and doesn't know how to factor that in and how to deal with them. That is a glaring aspect of the French system. Also, historically speaking, the French have what is called colorblind egalitarianism, and what is the French version of secularism, laïcité, as they have known it since the Republic's inception. This has worked to a certain extent, where all citizens are deemed as part of a meritocracy.
Yeah.
But of course, when it comes to its immigrant population, this has not been the case in these urban, metropolitan, suburban regions. But at the same time, this must also be said that police brutality is not unique to France or to the US. It exists universally speaking. I mean, what is police brutality in India or Iran or Pakistan or China?
Yeah.
So let's not just undermine the police and law enforcement who actually are under immense pressure to do what they have to do and maintain a law and order. In the case of these suburbs outside Paris and Marseille and other cities, the police at times are actually scared to go in to combat those who are peddling drugs or weapons. And the matter is left to the gendarmerie to take over. And then the gendarmerie does come in and it has a very high-handed response. That's so much for the social aspects of the presidency and the French Republic. Also, there are economic problems that beset the French Republic, the Fifth Republic, and that has partly also to do with France's intrinsic anti-growth, anti-capitalist model with over-generous state benefits and reforms that have never been executed. I mean, throwing money and having public services which do not necessarily trickle down to one and all is also what you see here. President Sarkozy, in 2008, threw a tranche of money to ameliorate for social housing, public transportation, schools and the like. But obviously it has not led to any positive impact on ground over a decade. When President Macron came to office in 2017, he asked a former minister, Jean-Louis Beaulieu, to undertake a blueprint for social amelioration. And that project was supposed to have been fulfilled, but then it was deemed to be too costly and was shelved.
I want to still understand, Mr. Wagmar, why is there a sense of despondency within the minority population as far as France is concerned, Paris is concerned? Why are they thinking politicians are doing nothing for us? And this is a deliberate attempt at attacking the minority community, and that's why these protests have really fireballed.
Well, it's partly the protests are nihilism and those who derive pleasure from the sheer sake of violence. And the left has been abetting it also, and the far left parties. All through spring 2023, when the pension reforms were going on which, of course, President Macron has also backed down, it was the far left which has been aiding and abetting attacks on the police. That needs to be also pointed out, and much of this has been generated by the left. In what is the tragedy of it all is that when the next elections take place, France will be torn between two extremes of the extreme left and right. There is no centrist politics at present as we speak, and establishment parties have no say or nobody in the French electorate holds confidence in them. That is going to be the tragedy which will unfold in times to come at the hustings. But also, when you talk about France's former possessions and its overseas citizens now who are a part of the French Republic, Well, the problem occurs only with African and with Algerian, particularly North African Algerian immigrants. France also has a population of Indo-Chinese immigrants from its former possessions in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. But we don't hear problems of that sort occurring with that community. It is very particular only with the Algerian question, which goes back to the Algerian civil war, and of course, Muslim cultural norms, which also are problematic in that France does not accommodate, as a rule, not just Muslims, but all communities, including its own Christian population, white Christian population, because France is colorblind. It has been so since the revolution and is a cherished aspect of its republicanism, that the state does not recognize religion. Now, partly there is an issue there too. You see, the problem with France, unlike, say, Britain, where in census data, or in the US or elsewhere, or even in India, you actually have data on minorities, their confessional affiliation, and such. In France, the census authorities don't even know what percentage of the population is Muslim or Christian or otherwise. There is a complete refusal to collect even basic data on such aspects because it is deemed to be divisive and not help to preserve the state's Republican laissez-faire ideals. Some of that will have to be tinkered in the future because France will need to understand its new population, its non-white population, and you need basic empirical data to understand what is happening for undertaking social programs as such. And so far, that has been steadfastly refused by French authorities. And that will need to be looked into in times to come.